I don't really think there's any excuse for our generation not to learn anything they want, because you can literally just go on YouTube and learn absolutely anything for free. And there's really no excuse. And you can also go on like pages like Coursera, Udemy, and like a bunch of different platforms like that, where you can just essentially learn from top universities. You can learn from really good institutions, people, and you guys never used to have that. I mean, like I was always alive when this was available, but this never existed like a couple years ago, right? So I think like now more than ever, there's no excuse not to figure it out and learn. And the prime example is me learning differential privacy. Like that is a very daunting task, but like, the internet made that possible. Without the internet and obviously like textbooks I was using, that would have not have been possible. And I just think that right now there's no excuse for you not to learn, especially now we also have LinkedIn. You have access to people all over the world who are professionals in their industry, who are writing papers and who are accomplishing amazing things. Like, and obviously a lot of people that you reach out to on LinkedIn don't answer, but like you get the oddball that does, and I'm very grateful for those people. And they help you, and everyone is like just very kind and willing to help. And you would actually be surprised how people are just willing to volunteer their time to help you in any way possible. And I really don't think that there's much more that we could ask for to really help facilitate our growth and learn.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Defo Data Channel podcast. I'm your host Deepak, and with me we have Brooke Joseph. In this podcast, we'll be discussing a lot of the young involvement in technology field and how they perceive the ever-evolving landscape of technology. With the rapid advancements and breakthroughs in various fields of technology, it is imperative to understand the perspective of the next generation of innovators and leaders. We will delve into their experiences, opinions, and insights into how technology impacts our lives and society as a whole. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Brooke, to discuss this important topic, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so excited to be here.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question. So, how did you become interested in technology and specifically in the field of artificial intelligence and federated learning?
Yeah, so I'm part of this program called the Knowledge Society, which is a program that essentially is like a team and human accelerator program. And we essentially go through this process where we get to go super deep in an area of interest. And I've always been super interested in math. And that's kind of like always something I've been like a nerd over. I love like investigating, going down rabbit holes with anything to do with math. So that's kind of what I was going into TKS with. And then from there, I was trying to see how I could apply it in any way. And then I came across artificial intelligence and specifically looking at neural networks. And I got super into like the multivariable calculus behind like backpropagation and just how neural networks worked in general. So from there, I started to investigate how I could code these things, and learning more of like learning it more from like a programmer's perspective as well. So that's kind of how I got into AI. And ever since I've been loving it, it's super interesting. I think it's a really big field right now, and it's going to only grow at this point because what artificial intelligence has allowed us to do is incredible. And I only think that its ability is going to grow. And that's how I got into AI. So I've been building and investigating AI for a while now. And then I've also kind of always been interested in cybersecurity and looking at how we could looking at the need for cybersecurity, because as everything goes online and as we use artificial intelligence more and more, we're going to see that there's a lot more privacy threats, especially since AI is all run on data and requires large amounts of data, which could potentially contain sensitive information that we don't necessarily want to be leaked, or we don't necessarily want other people to know about us. So that's kind of how I got into federated learning, because I was looking at like, okay, I'm super into AI, but I want to see how we can sort of secure this, make it more private. And that's kind of where I came into, or started to get interested into federated learning, which is basically, if I could just give a brief overview, is basically when we have these AI models that we train using data that's not centrally located on the device, which essentially means that we can train models with people keeping their own data on their centrally located on their device. So essentially how that works is sending models to these clients and having clients use their data to train the models and then send updated parameters to a central server. And so that's kind of how federated learning works. And I'm super into it right now, and I think it's a very promising field for all the reasons I mentioned and many more. Now, even getting more niche into that, I've been looking at how we can apply differential privacy in federated learning, because there are some gaps. And the whole idea of federated learning, right, is to provide this privacy for the data, for sensitive data and sensitive information, to secure that data. So it's important that, we are covering all the area possible. So that's kind of how I got into looking at, okay, how can we apply differential privacy, which is still a very researched field, because DP is it's very there's always this privacy accuracy trade-off. So it's important that we keep this into account when we're using it in any fashion or any way in ML, FL, whatever. So that's kind of where I'm going right now and where I'm headed and what I've been interested in.
Great, absolutely great. So, could you tell us a bit more about your experience as an innovator at the Knowledge Society and the specific projects you have been involved in, actually?
Yeah, for sure. So TKS, or the Knowledge Society, is an amazing program. It essentially helps you, or acts as like a forcing function, or pushes you essentially to create and innovate, and it has and provides all these amazing mentors. And I've met so many people, so all my directors, incredible people. They essentially help you and aid you in this process, but you get to pick an area of interest. So personally, I picked artificial intelligence, but some people are doing gene editing, renewable energy. I don't really know all this, all the focuses, but there's many areas that you can focus in. So I chose artificial intelligence, and then from there you get to build projects and you get mentorship from people, and then alongside these projects, you also get to compete in hackathons and actually pitch ideas to multi-billion-dollar companies, which is incredible. So I had the opportunity to pitch a AI solution for personalized shopping to Walmart. Or we got to put together a deck. I shouldn't say I was able to pitch it, but we got to put together a deck to send to Walmart. Currently, I'm working on putting together a deck and a pitch to send to Amazon. And so there's just incredible opportunities like that. And they've been partnered with CIBC, MasterCard, all these amazing institutions or companies as well. And that's kind of the main thing of TKS. And then in terms of the hackathons, I also was able to compete in 2 hackathons and was successful in both of them. So I was really proud of that. And then in terms of my actual focus and my actual the big project that I'm working on. So obviously it's centralized around artificial intelligence. So the first project or first area of research that I kind of delved into was looking at how AI was being applied to semiconductors. And so I was kind of searching to see how it was being applied. And I got super into looking at how AI was being applied to silicon wafer inspection, because during the pandemic, there was a semiconductor shortage, and this almost they destroyed the economy essentially, because everything relies on semiconductors. So I was super interested, or technology relies on semiconductors, I should say. So I was super interested in seeing, okay, how can we accelerate this process? And so currently a lot of factories are looking into investing into AI to increase the speed and the production speed, so that we can pump more of these wafers and more of these semiconductors out. So they found that a major time, or something that was time consuming, was the actual inspection, because you essentially have these very qualified and intelligent engineers looking in these tiny little microscopes, trying to see all of the different cells on the semiconductor. So that's kind of, I was super into that for a while. I wrote an article on it, and then I started getting into federated learning. And so for my first project, I worked with a framework called TensorFlow Federated, which was created by Google, I believe. And essentially I worked with TensorFlow Federated to create a model for image classification using the MNIST dataset, which, if you're unfamiliar with, is just essentially the drawings of numbers. And essentially what you do, it's a very classic classic data set using AI, and it's this classic example of artificial intelligence being able to classify drawings of numbers. Is kind of cool. So I worked with the MNIST data set and TensorFlow Federated. That was like my first introduction to FL. And then so for my second project, I had two things that I kind of worked on. So first of all, I looked at secure aggregation and multi-party computation, which was also kind of a new idea, a new explored idea, which was introduced by researchers at Google. A lot of the current research of on FL right now is by Google, because obviously they introduced it, but they also have a very impressive team of researchers who are currently exploring it and spending and devoting a lot of time on this very topic. So that's kind of what I did there. And then I also looked at secure aggregation plus, and then light secure aggregation, which were all different ways of securing the aggregation process. So in federated learning. So like I mentioned, when we have the models sent to these clients, right? And these clients are going to train the models and send updated parameters to a central server. And the central server is going to aggregate all of the information. But as researchers found that those updated parameters themselves could contain sensitive information that clients don't necessarily want leaked. So it's important that we secure this process in any way possible. So that's kind of where this idea of securing specifically the aggregation process, because that's like the only time that the server or any information leaves the client's device. So that's kind of the idea there. And so I was looking at different methods for how that was done, and that was like a large part of my winter break that I was like devoting to that. And then afterwards, I started looking at using TensorFlow Private and TensorFlow Federated to create a federated model that uses differential privacy, specifically for stochastic gradient descent. So it uses differentially private stochastic gradient descent. So that essentially just adds noise to all the updated parameters that are sent to the server and whatnot. So it's combining two areas of interest. So I kind of was nerding out over differential privacy for a while, because that is a very mathematically dense topic. So it took me a really long time to like wrap my head around it. And I don't even think it's fully understood, to be honest, but I understand enough to get a very good solid idea of how differentially private stochastic gradient descent works. So that's kind of what I was into for a while. And I wrote an article about that, created a video about secure aggregation. And then currently I'm working, this has been a project going on for a while because it's taking a lot longer than I thought it was going to, but I was looking at working with Raspberry Pis to essentially create a federated model that was in a non-simulated environment, because currently, federated models are very hard to deploy in the real world because it requires you to have a large amount of data, clients to choose from. So that's why you see companies like Google, Amazon's even hiring or working with teams of researchers at like MIT and whatnot working on it. You see institutions and large companies specifically working with federated learning, because it's so hard, because they have access to all these clients and all this information, right? So it's very hard for me to actually deploy one of these models in the real world. So that's kind of why I've been trying to fiddle around with Raspberry Pis. It's not working the way I thought I was going to, but I'm trying my best. And then I'm also looking at how we can make this process secure, working with TensorFlow Private. But those are like my main areas that I've been interested in right now, and it's kind of all over the place. But yeah.
Really, really, really great to hear, actually. And if I remember, like I had a podcast about federated learning, and so there was a framework called Flower.
Yeah.
And so
So
my guess,
actually,
she was
sorry.
actually exploring this. No, I was telling, like she was exploring, like, so my guest was Maria Bona. She was actually working with that Flower team at that time, and she was kind of exploring, or like they were like, I think she also mentioned, like it's very hard to deploy it in the real world, like the points which you actually just raised now.
Right.
So I just thought about it.
So actually Flower is I was exploring Flower for a while too. And the article I wrote about secure aggregation, I was looking at how Flower was like deploying it. And I spoke to, so they have like a Slack channel. And so I spoke to some of the people who actually created Flower, and they mentioned how it's like very new right now. And they're currently like investigating how they're going to like, how this is going to look. So it's all very new, but the code I have on my article is very generalized code on how this will be deployed at one point. But yeah, that's awesome.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So to my next question. So, what are some of the challenges that you have faced as a youngster in the technology industry, and how are you trying to overcome them?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, being part of the Knowledge Society, I feel like I'm very, very lucky because I have found a community of people who are so supportive and really just like make anything feel possible. So it's really nice to be in that community of people because everyone is so sweet. But I will say, I think that when I step outside of that community and try to like really put my name out there on my own, I think that one of the most difficult things is being taken seriously. And also I find that it's hard, it's difficult but not impossible, definitely not impossible, to like learn very complex topics very fast. So for example, differential privacy, that took me like almost a month to really wrap my head around. And it's because I'm in high school still, so like a lot of like the advanced probability, the concepts are very hard, like they're not at my level, they're not even at undergrad level, so it takes a little bit. That's like definitely a challenge I've come across, but it's definitely not impossible. If you really want to learn it, you will learn it. So when I was learning about differential privacy, I was watching lectures on YouTube, I was reading bunch like a lots and lots and lots of papers, and I was also like, whenever I was like confused about the notation or whatnot, I actually went to my teacher and I was like, okay, do you have any textbooks, like university textbooks I can use? And so he gave me some textbooks and I was like flipping through them. So I was like cross like referencing. So I was looking at like, okay, I was looking at a research paper, then I was looking at the textbook, and then it was like kind of like a code and I was learning it. And that's why it took me so long. And I think that's like one of the challenges, but it's not impossible. And if you have the passion and drive to really learn it, then you will. And it won't take forever, so that's like definitely a challenge. I do think another challenge is being taken seriously as well, especially as a woman. I think that's also kind of like a factor. But I think even as like just a Gen Z person in general, I think that is a challenge because you are young, we are young, and we don't know everything. Actually, I would argue I know very little, and there's so much more to learn in the world. And that's why I think like I seek experiences and I look for opportunities because I do want to learn. And I think that there are some people who appreciate that and some people who just don't have time for that. And that's fair. That's completely understandable. And I think that is a challenge. Just to be heard and like and have people like just understand that like you want to learn and you want to be there. You're not trying to seem like you know everything, because you don't. I think those are like the biggest challenges. But I will say I really believe in this generation of people. I could be biased because I am surrounded by some of the brightest minds in our generation right now at the Knowledge Society. But I believe that we have a lot of passion. We also look at a lot of problems and we don't think they're impossible to tackle. And I think there's a lot of intelligent people working on big projects right now that the world needs. So I'm very optimistic.
Great, great, really great.
Yeah.
So how do you see your generation impacting and shaping the future of technology, and how do you see technology impacting and shaping the future of your generation actually?
Yeah. So I think that my generation, again, like I said, I'm probably biased, but I think my generation is making waves in the field, especially students at the Knowledge Society. So if you haven't heard of TKS, I strongly advise you check out a lot of the students because I'm just one person, but there's so many other people accomplishing so many amazing things and doing incredible things. You see people working on huge projects that are going to change the future. So I think that that is definitely I think that we're really putting a effort into changing the world and making a difference. We see problems in the world and we're not afraid to tackle them. And I think that is probably different than any other generation before, especially with like climate change. I see a lot of people at TKS devoting a lot of time to this. And I don't know, things like that really inspire me, and I do think that our generation is going to make a large impact in technology in the world in general. I don't necessarily know that it would just be technology. And then in terms of like how technology is impacting us, I mean, speaking more of a in general, I think that a large part of our generation is this is kind of like I don't know if this is the answer that you're looking for, but they're kind of like addicted to social media. I have noticed that. And I think that it's kind of different when I talk to students at TKS, because the students at TKS are not normal. They are very different. They're very ambitious, and they understand, they see a future and they work towards it. But in general, when I speak to people in my generation, I have noticed that there's like a social media addiction, or there's a nowadays addiction to ChatGPT. Like, okay, let me just ask ChatGPT, and then that's like all they rely on. So I think that there's going to be there's going to be the two groups of maybe Gen Z people. There's going to be people who are addicted to this technology, rely on this technology, and I don't necessarily know that that's a good thing. And then there's going to be people who are creating this technology and making waves in the future, and I think that they're going to be I don't know, that's just my opinion. And going back to the ChatGPT thing, I find that really interesting, that I'll be talking to my friends, and whenever we're doing like a project or whatever, and they're like, let me just ask ChatGPT, let me ask ChatGPT. And I always question that, because, you know, like chatbots are not always 100% accurate, right? So you have to be careful when you're like take what ChatGPT says with like a grain of salt, right? So I think there's a gap in in some people's knowledge there, but other than that, I'm pretty optimistic about our generation for sure.
Right, right.
Hmm.
So, so to my next question. So, like, what kind of support and resources do you think are necessary for youngsters to successfully enter and excel in this tech industry? Looking at your experience.
Um, I think right now, online, like just even like having the internet in general is enough. I think if anyone, um, I don't really think there's any excuse for our generation not to learn anything they want, because you can literally just go on YouTube and learn absolutely anything for free. And there's really no excuse. And then you can also go on like pages like Coursera, Udemy, and like a bunch of different platforms like that, where you can just essentially learn from top universities. You can learn from really good institutions, people, and you guys never used to have that. I mean, like I was always alive when this was available, but this never existed like a couple years ago, right? So I think like now more than ever, there's no excuse not to figure it out and learn. And the prime example is me learning differential privacy. Like that is a very daunting task, but like, you know, the internet made that possible. Without the internet, and obviously like textbooks I was using, that would have not have been possible. And I just think that right now there's no excuse for you not to learn, especially now we also have LinkedIn. You have access to people all over the world who are professionals in their industry, who are writing papers and who are doing accomplishing amazing things. Like, and obviously a lot of people that you reach out to on LinkedIn don't answer, but like you get the oddball that does, and very grateful for those people. And they help you, and everyone is like just very kind and willing to help. And you would actually be surprised how people are just willing to volunteer their time to help you in any way possible. And I really don't think that there's much more that we could ask for to really help facilitate our growth and learn. Um, yeah, and then obviously I'm very lucky to be a part of the Knowledge Society, where I have mentors and I have people who are really giving me that extra push that maybe a lot of people don't necessarily are not necessarily lucky to have. But again, even if you're not part of the Knowledge Society, you can go on LinkedIn and find mentors. You can find people who are in your field doing what you want to do. Ask them how they got there. Ask them what advice they have. Ask them for help on projects. You know, just really I think really putting your name out there and really showing people what you're capable of, showing people your passion is really important. And I think it's a pretty good return on investment, if you ask me. Um, and yeah, I think like we have a lot of the resources that we need. We have Google Scholar even, like that's just like insane. We can get any paper, essentially any paper we want for free, which is crazy. So yeah, yeah, I would say that we are pretty lucky and very privileged to have all these access to all these things.
Yeah, that's really great to hear actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, so how do you think your diverse background and experiences shape your approach to problem solving and creativity in this technological field?
Yeah, I think a major I think something really important or a staple in my personality, if you will, is my ability to work hard, and I think I'm pretty resilient, and I think that comes from having I've had a lot of jobs. Even I'm just 17 and I've had a lot of work experience, and I think that has really helped me grow self-discipline. So even from the age of like 10 years old, I don't remember the specific age, but I was young and I was working at my dad's store, and I was waking up early putting, he had a produce market, so I was like helping stock shelves and working as a cashier and whatnot. So that I really think instilled a lot of discipline in me, and also saw my dad work really hard as well. This is getting really personal, I guess, but I saw my dad work really hard, and that set like a high standard. It showed me like what hard work really meant, and I think that has really carried on with me throughout my whole life, and I think that has allowed me to really just like push through a lot of like hard tasks and learn as much as I can. I also think just like in general, I learned how to converse with people, because I do find that a large part of my generation, because it's everyone's just on social media, everyone's texting and online, the social skills sometimes is not really there, or is not good. And I think like I've been very lucky to have had many jobs and to really build that skill. I've interacted with a lot of different characters and learned about a lot of different people, and I think that has really obviously there's so much more to learn, and I'm just like at the very beginning of my learning experience and learning how to converse with people, of course. But I do think that I'm at a point where I've had a lot of experiences, and that has really helped me, network, learn how to talk to people, and also really just put in all my effort, work really hard. So in terms of my creativity, I think I've always just like looked for opportunities to really just grow as an individual in general, and kind of just allowed the skills to grow from there. So I've had an opportunity to work at my local university as a researcher, and well, shouldn't really say researcher. I kind of just like helped in a research lab. So if you want to call that a researcher, and then I just like had opportunities to work at like a law firm, and just like also just like do all these amazing things. And I think that has all really helped me get to where I am today. I think a big thing is that I was a part of a program called Bruce White Math Academy, which was taught by one of the best math teachers in Canada. He won like the Prime Minister Award for teaching. He was insane. I love him. His name is Bruce White, and he was my very first mentor, and he was like intelligent, extremely smart. He was like 80 years old and he was still teaching math. And I just was so grateful. And to this day, I'm so grateful that I had him as a mentor, as a teacher, as someone who taught me math. So I think that was a big thing that really built my passion for math. He showed me and taught me how to learn advanced things as well, because I was in grade 7 and 8 and even the beginning of high school, and I was learning all these very complex math ideas and very advanced math ideas that I probably wouldn't have been learning till like first year university at a very young age. So that I think that really helped me learn how to learn on a learning curve and that, or learn how to learn something that's way too above me. Yeah, but overall, I just think that there's so many more experiences that I am very lucky to go through, and that's going to help me grow as an individual. Yeah, yeah,
It was great to hear actually.
yeah,
Thanks for sharing.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so how do you see the role of education and training evolving to meet the needs of Gen Z in this particular era?
Yeah. So I think that again, I always come back to TKS. I love this program, but I think that they take a very novel approach to learning that you don't get in a classroom. Like I have been at the Knowledge Society for less than a year, and I feel like I have gotten more out of this program than I have gotten out of my educational system in Ontario. And I don't necessarily, that could be very much like, obviously I learned a lot of good foundations. I'm not saying that, like screw school, like I'm not saying that at all, but I just think that the Knowledge Society takes such a unique approach to education, and it's very much independent. You learn what you want to learn, you learn something you're passionate about, and it really allows you to explore, not only just explore, but it pushes you to network with people, learn how to talk to people, which is such an important skill that you don't learn in school. You don't learn how to converse with people, build relationships with people, and what that looks like, what networking looks like. So that's a very, very important skill. It teaches you how to cold email, or they teach you how to cold email, which is also really important, learning how to reach out to people who are experts in the industry that may not necessarily get back to you on the first email or whatnot. And so I think starting to learn skills like that are very important for growing our generation for the future. So I think that the Knowledge Society takes, again, a very unique approach to education that I think should be modeled more. I really do. I think that a lot of students, and not just myself, but a lot of students get so much out of the program. And I don't know if I'm biased because I just love it so much, but I would say that that's the type of education that we should look and seek more of, rather than just like the traditional sit in the classroom, raise your hand, ask questions. It's a lot of just memorizing things and then like regurgitating it and memorizing and regurgitating it. It's over and over. It's a very repetitive cycle. And if you're a good test taker, you're going to succeed and do well. And if you're not a good test taker, you're not going to succeed and do well, because that's just how the system works. And I don't necessarily know that I agree that it's the best measure of intelligence, because I know plenty of people who are very successful and very intelligent people who never did well in school. A prime example would be my brother. He's one of the smartest people I know, but he didn't really succeed in school. He didn't do well in school. He was more of an entrepreneur. He created a business, and it just shows that there's a lot of people who just don't mesh well with that educational system, and who are better off, learning their own unique way. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's not the best measure of intelligence. I think I kind of diverged or went off the what your question was, but to bring it back, I would say, again, look up TKS, look up what they're doing, incredible. And the way that they're teaching students, I can attest to this because I'm a part of the program, is absolutely revolutionary and incredible.
Perfect. So I'm going to skip the question regarding case study, because you already, I think, explained some of the works which you are actually doing. So how do you balance your involvement in the this is one of the important question which I felt like asking actually. So how do you balance your involvement in the technology industry with your other responsibilities such as school, friends, and family?
Yeah, that's an amazing question, and something I think I'm not perfect at all. I think sometimes I can get super hyper focused in my work, and it's kind of a bad quality because I neglect a lot of my basic needs, and also needs like being there for my family and friends. So I'm working on it. It's a work in progress, but right now I think just like being a very self-aware person is very important. Just being aware that you have needs as an individual, but you also have friends that you should probably hang out with sometimes, and you have family that you should be there for. And it's not always just about work all the time. Like, I'm a very passionate person about the work I'm doing. I'm very, very excited, and I think it's a very promising field. But I also think it's really important to hang out with friends like once in a while, like maybe like once a week, or because that's a part of growing up. And I have been told in the past that sometimes, I got to step back and act like my age a little bit, because I did grow up around adults like my whole life. So I feel like sometimes I found myself skipping steps and just focusing mainly on work when I should probably go with my friends more. So I think I'm getting better at it. I'm becoming more aware of it, but I'm definitely not perfect. So I think just being aware of it, setting time specifically for that is also helpful. sometimes it's not super realistic because like things and deadlines come up like last minute, which is like completely understandable. But I think like if you say like, okay, Saturday night is going to be like for my family, and then maybe sometimes it'll be for my friends, and then I'm not going to, or you, and then just tell yourself I'm not going to say no to opportunities to hang out with my friends when it's like kind of like we haven't hung out in a while. And I think I've been getting better at that. Um, yeah, so like for example, I'm going to Montreal with one of my friends in I think a week. We're going on the 13th, and I just like normally like in the past I would have said no because I just need to focus on work and whatnot. But like allowing yourself to take like a 3 day break is okay. Like it's fine sometimes, and it's actually healthy because if you're always working, then you're gonna get burnt out, and maybe you won't even feel burnt out in the short term, but maybe you'll feel it in a month, a year, 5 years. And that it's very, very real. And you also have to enjoy life. Like life, in my opinion, this is obviously just, I think it changes person to person, but in my opinion, life is not only about work. I think it's a big part of it, but it's also about enjoying enjoying the fruits of your labor, enjoying time with your friends and family, and just like seeing the beauty in life as well, experiencing, having life experiences is really important. And yeah, I mean, it's again, a work in progress, but I am a very self-aware person and I know that I'm not perfect. And I'm definitely trying to address it.
Such a honest answer, actually. I never thought that you'd be so honest. But yeah, like I really like that part where you clearly called it out. Imagine we continuously do something which we know. I know this. I am only doing this. Then we'll never learn, or we will never actually see what is on the other side. Maybe there'll be a better thing on the other side, which we will only gain when we start talking. So one of the thing which you mentioned, networking, I really regret that why I didn't use LinkedIn earlier in my career. I only started understanding concepts or things which are happening outside of my nutshell only through this LinkedIn, because if LinkedIn wasn't there, then I don't know you basically.
Yeah.
I never I will not be knowing like what Brooke is actually working on, or whether Brooke Joseph is even existing in this world. No, so I really don't know, like, so that's the thing, like that's the reason I conduct podcasts, because in podcast definitely people share their experience, share their knowledge, and that will actually like help many people. So yeah, so
Yeah.
that's what I want to actually point out.
Oh, I love that. No, I love that for sure. I definitely, definitely agree. And I think like as I get older, I'm obviously still very young, but I've started appreciating conversations with people and learning about their life as well, especially since I am so young. I like talking to people who are older than me and who have had many, many more life experiences and can kind of like share and give information about like, what worked, what didn't in life. And I think that really, really helps me kind of like change my mindset and also like approach life a little differently. I try to like, obviously, I think a big thing is like you can only hear so much advice from people. It's really when you kind of go through something yourself that you're like, okay, yeah, I see it now and I can understand it. But I do think that there's a lot of value in just like getting to know people. And I also just think that there's like so many beautiful people in the world that have gone through so many things that it's just like it's very interesting to learn about. And I think that the love for that started when I was young because my dad, he hired a lot of immigrants who came to over to Canada and just like gave them opportunities to work and gave them jobs because they sometimes they weren't like super fluent in English and whatnot. And it's like very interesting because I would just hear so many like life stories about people from all over the world. And at a young age, I remember being so fascinated by it because like I was young and I obviously like was only really familiar with like this little, it's not like a little city that I'm in, and my little bubble of people that I see every day. Like I see my grandparents, my parents, and whatnot. And then just hearing these stories where it was so fascinating to me because I'm like, oh, there's so much more to the world. And I love going away. I love meeting people and learning about different cultures and experiences. And I think there's a lot of beauty in that. And then just a lot of beauty in just so many people around the world. And I think there's so much we can learn from everyone at any age. Um, and I'm always love learning people and learning about their stories and hearing about any advice that they have to give. Yeah.
Right, right. So my last question, and so what are your future career goals in the technology industry, and how do you plan on achieving them?
Yeah, so I mean, I always go in with an open mind. I definitely don't have anything like this is exactly what's going to happen, because I think there's just so many moving parts and anything could change. But right now, I'm super interested in pursuing a career in like research, specifically like federated learning research. It would be cool to look at how differential privacy and federated learning at the intersection between the two, because there is a lot of research going into that currently. A lot of researchers and pretty cool people at Google and other companies who are working on stuff like that. So that would be really cool. Again, I'm always like open to anything. So I'm starting my own business is something I would be interested in doing, but I don't really have a clear idea right now, and it's definitely not something I would force. It would have to be like very like obvious, like this is a good idea for a business, and pursue that. Yeah, I mean, I have goals, but I also don't have an emotional attachment to goals either. I think that they'd be nice to achieve, but I think that sometimes life has a weird way of making things work out. And I'm a very optimistic person, and I feel like sometimes you may think something is right for you, but it's not, and you just got to trust that something good for will fall into place for you. And I don't know, maybe that's not the best mindset to have, but I like to think that way.
Great, great, great.
Yeah.
No, I really enjoyed this conversation, Brooke, and
Yeah, me
thank you
too.
so much actually for sharing your knowledge on this. And I really appreciate you for sharing your experience working in this field. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love hearing about your life story as well and everything you've been working on.